Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to the joint hybrid planning board meeting of August 14th. Call to order, Ms. Creighton, not here. Ms. Delicio, not here. Ms. Foley.
Here.
Mr. Only.
Here.
Ms. Philbrick.
Here.
Ms. Tenney.
Here.
Looks like we have a quorum tonight. I would like to remind all board members, guests, to ask to be recognized by the chair if you wish to speak, and this meeting's being recorded. First item is acknowledgement, receipt of correspondence. I posted a copied all of you an Iavoni letter on 8/1. Also, Gail has said City of Gloucester 2, Town of Wenham 1, and Town of Essex 1. At this time, I'd like entertain any comments on items not on the agenda from the public with a limited amount of time. Does anyone from the public wish to speak? Okay, the next item is draft data on housing. So this is a topic for discussion. Betsy, if you could give the board a little primer on what you've done and where you stand and
So, due to the fact that there's some inconsistencies, I have a certain amount of data out there, and it's based on the census, and various other documents, but predominantly the census. And then, Faye Dingle, who was working over the summer, took some of that information and put it into, kind of processed it into forms. My concern is that one of the key elements is that there's still missing some housing units from the census data and what we're getting on assessor's database.
how old is the database? Do we know?
I assume it's fairly up to date. However, I did send out an email about 10 days, 2 weeks ago to the building inspector and the assessor asking questions on how accessory apartments were addressed. And that was met with some concerns by both parties. And I have said to the town manager I'd be willing to sit down and talk about how there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect between when a building permit gets issued and then what it's considered. So if you look at the data, there's a number of data cards that it'll say it's a single family dwelling, but then the accessory apartment over the garage is considered another single family dwelling on the same lot. So, and then,
So what do you guys need from the task force standpoint as far as data? At least that would be the priority, I think.
Well, in a way, it doesn't, the data doesn't really matter, it's the zoning that matters. If we're gonna be trying to comply, it's the zoning bylaw, not the data. It's good to have the data to support what we're gonna do with zoning, but what we really need to do is use a new zoning ordinance to straighten this all out as best we can.
Mary?
So, and I would say, we shouldn't be making any, big town bylaw changes, not even knowing what we have, right? So if we can't address the basic data of what we have, what we think we need, and what of a change, say, the MBTA zoning overlay would be, or any other bylaw overlay or new bylaw, I find that absurd. I think we have known about this for years. We have known about the zoning bylaws for years. And we've known that ADUs has been not tracked properly. And I think I've said at least every other meeting that, the town needs to start addressing that, and it never happens. And so you know, it not your issue per se, but, you know, the town needs to stop, get a consultant or whoever needs to be gotten and get this data, right? I mean, we're not that big of a town, we should know how many single-family houses we have, how many multifamily, how many ADUs, what district they're in. You know, I don't know how the building inspector does his job if he doesn't know if somebody rightfully has an ADU or not, if they're in compliance or not. So I totally disagree that the MBTA task force and thus the planning board doesn't need this data to do their job correctly.
I mean, I have figures, but they're not totally accurate. And
Could you, do
there's
you estimate like a
discrepancy.
margin of error in those?
I haven't estimated a margin of error, but, so for example, according to the census, there's 2,308 housing units. And of that, 1,725 are single-family units, and according to the assessor's database, 411 are multifamily units. Now, multifamily units can also be multifamily with some retail. So, like some of the downtowns. So, but that's, if you look at all those numbers together, there's like 150 units missing from the total figure.
But so could we back into the data, right, sorry, Ron, but could we say, you know, okay, it says we have 400 multifamily, everybody takes 100 and we investigate and, you know, come up with some clean data and then move on to the next, or a consultant do that. We're not dealing with huge numbers here.
Yeah.
Are any ADUs mentioned in any of this data?
I got a list from Sarah Mellish of the ADUs,
How
and
did she get that list?
she actually, as ZBA chair, tracked it for like 10 years. So, anyhow, I started kind of digging into that. And again, part of the problem is that the former assessor had things set up in a certain manner. And so you could look at a house, at a property that had a primary house and two kind of accessory units, like clearly subordinate to the main house. But those come across as single families, or they don't come across at all.
Well, how are we doing that for tax purposes then? I mean, I think we're in a whole lot of woe if we don't even know if we've got 3 single families on a lot or a single family with 2 accessory buildings. I don't know how they're being taxed. Maybe we're all being overtaxed.
Laura?
Is the purpose of the data to provide the baseline for,
Yeah.
here's what we have for
Yeah.
existing units? So would it be possible to take the data and say, you know, in a chart or something, here's what we know with some level of certainty, there's no question about, you know, what house is on this lot, and then here are the number of houses that, and we don't have to, you know, list the lots for public consumption or anything, but
Right.
just, you know, sort of track it so that you can go back and find those units and say, here are the ones with questions about it, what percentage are we talking about of lots? Because if it's 5% or something, then, you know, figure a margin of error.
It's probably less than 5%,
Right,
but
so-
it's,
If we could document that, then
By
it seems
district?
like you could move forward
Yeah.
once you get to that point. And if you wanna do the forensics later, if that's important, then certainly that could be done.
Yeah.
But, you know, let's not come to a stop because
No, no,
there's a
no.
question of 5% one way or the
no,
other.
in fact, it's actually a start,
Uh-huh,
or more of a start,
yeah,
because we've honed down, you know, so there's a bunch of units that just, I don't know how some of them came to be.
yeah.
So,
So I think we just put a kind of asterisk next to those and say, you know, these we need to come back to at some point and
yeah,
finish sussing it out, but in the meantime, here's what we
So
know.
the type of housing by district.
However you're setting it up,
Are you
Betsy, I
setting
think
it
is.
up by district?
yeah.
So is this something, I'm sorry, can I add? Is this something that we can ask the building inspector to research?
Well, I sent out an email to the building inspector and the assessor and a couple of other people, and I got some kind of odd responses. There seems to be, to me anyhow, kind of a little bit of a disconnect between when the building inspector issues a building permit, issues an occupancy, and then it goes to the assessor's office. So for example, building inspector issues a permit for a new garage and gives the occupancy permit, and then the assessor goes out and lo and behold, there's an accessory unit on the second floor of the garage. So, but she counts that as a single family house when it's clearly subordinate to the main house.
So I'm not sure I
How
understand.
that's possible without enforcement?
She counts the apartment above the garage as another single family, or,
So in the assessor's database, it's classified as a single family. So it's two single families on the same.
I mean, I'll just use my home as an example. So when we purchased the home, we had a detached garage, we did some renovations and we attached them. But regardless, either way, we would have had a living space above our garage. We chose to connect the two, right? So it's reasonable for people to put living space above the garage,
Mhm.
right? So I mean, I actually had a conversation with Greg last week about buildings, accessory buildings. We have, Chris likes to remind us, boarding house regulations. So if someone did such a thing, had that, could you rent that as a boarder in a detached space legally? What do you think? He said he was gonna look into it. So I mean, I guess I'm posing that too, I mean, cause I was gonna bring that up, my apologies for being late, but I mean, it just brought up an interesting question. So if you had an accessory building, not an accessory dwelling building, could you rent that out as a room? What are the standards?
Well, as I understand the zoning, you can have up to 4 boarders. So,
Could you have 4 outbuildings? Could someone live in your garage as a boarder? What's the criteria?
Building
There are
code
no
issue.
criteria.
but I think,
Well, I mean, if there's no criteria, then we could actually really have a big problem, in my opinion.
so
It's a building code, no?
as I understand boarders, that they don't have separate
Kitchens.
kitchens and separate facilities, so it's not a separate dwelling unit. It's,
Roommates. Kind of a roommate.
So they would have access, this is what I was trying to just go down.
so they have access to
To the
the
main
kitchen, yeah.
I mean, that would be my assumption, but if you
Right.
had an outbuilding, an accessory building, and you turn that into, it had a bathroom, just say, and a bed, is that a boarder? If they don't have access to the main house?
So you could have somebody in your shed, somebody in your garage.
Yeah,
somebody.
I'm asking.
Yeah.
I think we need some
Well, and
clarification
then-
on that
and then-
bylaw.
The building inspector has indicated that there's, and also the ZBA chair has indicated there's a lot of guest houses being constructed. So what's a guest house? It's not
What's the
defined.
difference between a guest house, an accessory building, a pool house? I mean, a pool house can have a kitchen and a bathroom, right? So
Right,
then can
right.
you Airbnb or rent it short term?
Right.
Like, I don't
Right,
know where
yeah.
we're going with this. So if we have these buildings and we're gonna now
So do
open it
those
up.
count as,
I don't know.
as dwelling units?
Well, I don't know, if there's a stove, I think that's the kicker in this town. Anything but a stove is an accessory building.
Laura, sorry.
Just getting back to the
Yeah.
purpose of what we're trying to do with the data that Betsy's collecting. I'm sure there are a lot of questions about what goes on in different kinds of scenarios that we probably can't answer with the data that's in your database or the respective tax and building inspection databases. But if we can pull what we know and then what is, needs to be future verification, and I think to start with that, I think clarifying as much as possible just based on what we know and not running scenarios at
Mhm.
this point
Mm-hmm,
is the clearest and
mm-hmm.
way forward with, here's our existing conditions. There may be all kinds of things happening that we can't tell by the zoning or by the building inspector.
Yeah. I mean,
permit
what
and
I
so forth.
suggested to the town manager is we sit down and go over a couple of examples and we try to see if we can figure out kind of better understanding or maybe fixing some of the assessor, how the assessor deals with some of the stuff the building inspector approves. And in that way, it ends up being a little cleaner in terms of tracking. One of my concerns is that if all these units are not tracked, then we have a bit of a problem in terms of meeting the 10% affordable is gonna increase with additional units. So if those units aren't being counted now, they should be counted.
If they're affordable. I mean,
Well, this,
No,
this.
no,
we don't
no,
know,
no,
we don't know.
Units.
No, the number of units, and then we have to take 10% of that. So
Yeah,
if we
this-
think we have 2,000 units now, when we really have 2,500 units, or.
Yeah, so that's one of my concerns.
I guess that one of the questions is whether an accessory dwelling unit counts as a dwelling unit for the SHI.
It does.
Well, I'm not sure of that.
I think we discussed that already.
Well, I
Well,
don't
we
think
had
it,
discussed it, but I think it's
not for the SHI, but it counts towards what we need to achieve 10% towards.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
It's the denominator.
Yes.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes, it is. We've had
Yes.
that conversation with Bobrowski.
So
A
on the.
unit's a unit.
Yeah.
So if it's an illegal unit, then does that count?
Well, it should.
Laura?
Into the weeds we
We
go.
are getting into the weeds.
Yeah, I was
This
just
is not,
gonna
you know, we're
say,
talking about
what-
5% or
what do we-
less.
Yeah,
This
what
is,
do we
yeah,
want to know?
let's move
and,
on, I
yeah,
suggest.
What do we want to know and what do we want to do here? And I think Laura made a good point that maybe we just get by district initially. How many ones, twos, threes are in that district, and we get that data. Let's find a date on when that data is valid from,
Okay,
you know.
And the source. I mean, we
Yeah.
need to know the source and what the purpose was for its collection.
right.
Is that the direction we want to start with at least? Mary?
Yeah, and I mean, because I think it can be pretty simple, because there's only a couple districts that allow more than single family, right? So you take, if we have 2,400 housing units, in District E, how many houses are there? In District A, how many houses are there, right? And so you just do high level down to low level, and I think there'll be, the 5% that we have to investigate, or somebody has to investigate more, but I think it should go pretty fast if we can, we can get it by district, right?
Right.
Now I think I know what we want, who's gonna do it.
Well, I do have some of this data. So, for example, multi-unit parcels. In the A zone, we have 30, in the B zone, we have 20, in the C zone, we have 31, in the D zone, we have 89, in the E zone, we have 46.
E is 89.
Huh?
Wow.
E is 46, and in G, we have 195, for a total of 411.
411, what were you reading off? What was it?
These are multi-unit parcels. So 411 is about,
So do we need to know the acreage they're on? And
oh, we
start
have,
to look at
we
the
have some of the
density this?
acreage. We have some of the acreage. So we have a fair amount of data. It's just, I'm not totally trusting it.
Did you send us that?
Pardon? No, I did not.
So, yeah, I don't wanna circulate stuff that's, at least to the board, but I don't wanna put stuff on the web that is not
Right,
final.
right,
I don't
right,
wanna
exactly.
get into a-
Absolutely not.
And what are we gonna do with this data when we
Yes.
get it? What is it gonna help us with?
Well, determine density and what we have as far as in the districts.
And is that important for something?
Well, is it important to say that how much more we need to do with this MBTA zoning change? Would it be important to know how much?
So I think I sent everybody a document that I put together on what is baseline.
Yeah, that was good.
And that document, it's basically a process of elimination of, you have the MBTA, you have the state who says, these are exempted parcels. So you go through and you come up with all the exempted parcels. Or the exempted uses, like wetlands and floodplain and stuff like that. Then you take a look at the town zoning. And you say, okay, well, it's by right, so let's take a look at what requires a special permit. So anything that's on a non-conforming lot, anything that is subject to chapter 91, anything that is in the water supply, groundwater supply district, anything that's in floodplain, there's a couple of others. So
Pull those out.
if you look at all of that, then at some point, we'll map out what's left.
So the data will tell us that, we'll pull all that stuff.
Yeah,
We can't do that. Well,
I'm doing some of it.
That's what the consultant, once we
And
get
then
the
we're in
consultant.
we'll be hiring a consultant.
Any? Well,
Sue made a good point that the, you know, similar to a site survey, when you're documenting existing conditions, you attribute the source, the date, and the certainty of anything, right? So if it came from the tax database or it came from the building inspection database, I think if we can map it back to all those things, that will
Right.
give us a baseline. There will be some margin for error because records are kept for different purposes and the way we keep records has changed and then we've gone paper to digital. And so with each of those, there's sort of a next generation of some noise probably. I think once we establish that baseline, there can be many uses for it on all these different committees that we're talking about. And couple that with a map that I think, I've only had a chance to skim this because I just got back, but with what you're kind of backing out with what's developable, we can map that easily enough, right? And then that will sort of pop out what parcels are available for discussion purposes and then combined with, you know, looking at the data. We may be able to map the data, you know, if you would actually have to go back by parcel to see where those ones pop out, but that might be interesting to do
Yeah.
at some point.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these things, once you can start to visualize them, you learn from the, you know, the patterns that you see.
so when you say a consultant would do this, we have somebody on.
We don't yet, but we're working on it. The town got a $50,000 grant to assist the MBTA task force in this. And the state has a very specific program that they want people to use. I'm not familiar with it. And it's a cross between GIS and an Excel spreadsheet. And I'm familiar with Excel, but I'm not a GIS person. So I'm
So
hunting around to try to find somebody.
There's some urgency here, I would think. To do this,
Yeah, it's being worked on.
okay.
I guess just to share my concern on this, my understanding when we voted for this money, there was money that was voted at town meeting that was under the planning. I thought the planning board was gonna have more discussion about who we were gonna use as consultant.
So I'm not familiar with the money that was voted at town meeting.
I think this was a grant.
This is a different pool of money she's talking about, I think.
This was
This is
the
a different
MBTA
pool of
grant.
money. There
But
was-
we voted in at least $50,000 for studies to work on this.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay,
Different studies.
But still, grant voted in money, I mean, we are the ultimate. Our job as elected officials is to do studies, it's not the MBTA task force. Their job can be something else, but our job as elected officials is to conduct studies and do this. So I do believe at a high level, we need to be involved with that process.
Okay, so can we move forward on this, that
So I'm
we will
gonna
move
continue
forward
to
on
crunch
getting the
numbers
state
and.
data and try to maybe get some preliminary data to
Yep.
us?
Yep.
And then we can kind of maybe continue on talking about this at our next
I mean, I think this group has a lot of historical knowledge too, so I think sharing the data, we might be able to add information from neighborhoods, so I think
Okay.
getting this out there
Keep it,
sooner than
yeah,
later.
keep Spoon feed us that stuff.
Okay,
It
Okay.
should not be distributed, however, outside of the planning board members.
Not
Okay.
at this point, because it's draft.
Yes.
I mean,
Okay. I
And
mean,
it's
what I have
incomplete.
right now is a bunch of drafts. And they will say draft until everybody's comfortable with what it is.
Well, a lot of the data you can just get on the map GIS, so, I mean, it's just, once we start drilling down is where the
Not that I
actual
disagree
data is.
with you, but it is public information, right? So I'm not sure what the concern is.
Well, if it's Betsy's work product of compiling preliminary data, I mean,
It's, yeah, it's subject to change.
it's a.
Yeah, I mean, my concern is that I don't want bad data out there.
And neither do I, but it is public information, right? That's all I'm saying. It's not, I feel like right now we're saying this and it sounds like we're trying to be secretive of
No,
this
no.
process. I'm just clarifying this is public information. And I think we all don't want bad information out there, but
Right.
I wanna be transparent and
Yeah.
if someone asks Betsy for it, I mean, she would have to share it too, right? It's public information.
I mean, I'll continue to work on the drafts and by the end of this week, I can get you several drafts.
Some things.
All right, thank you, Chris.
Just one thing, Betsy, you should, when you release this data, I think you should make clear that it's preliminary and subject to change, just have
Right,
a disclaimer on it. So-
right.
And again, the point in time,
Right, the
Right.
date, the
That
date of this data
captures
is, you know,
and its
it's from 10
source.
years ago when a census was
right,
done.
and the purpose.
So I guess
Okay.
that's a little concerning. The town does an annual census. Why don't we have good data? They hound us, send in our forms.
I specifically asked the town clerk if she had census data, and she did not. So,
Why do we send the form back every
Can
year?
we just do a census?
We just send it back every year.
That's a different,
It's tracking
That's a
your
different
dogs, that's dog license.
collection
Ah.
of data, I believe. The government census, federal government census, it happens every 10 years, collecting different data than the town census is, which is,
so we
How
have
many people in your house,
2010,
you have a
we
dog?
have 2020, we have
Oh, that's-
guesstimates for,
that's federal
2000
census
and-
data,
yeah,
demographics, which
Yeah.
I don't think the town is asking demographic information.
yeah, they just want to know
How many people in
for
your
the,
household?
for the street listing book.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I added this aquifer protection district discussion, which I was missing. I thought that we would be discussing this tonight, and I did see that you sent us a lot of information into that
So,
stuff.
we-
So what,
Okay, so we had talked, maybe I misunderstood something here, but we had talked a while ago about the fact that there's elements of the aquifer protection zoning that were not legal. Like that whole section about you can't sign an A&R or whatever. And so I ended up just going to take a look at it and I retweaked it. And I used some of Mark Bobrowski's language and then I ended up putting a little more detail in there.
a lot of detail in here, and.
So, I mean, I think
But it
it,
repeats itself, I mean, it goes 10 to 2 in the front, and then there's another, then there's another.
well,
group
one of them
10.
is the one that's gonna be deleted. So the
So-
first one is the one that's gonna be deleted. And the second
Just
one,
the thing in red was gonna be deleted.
No, no, no,
10
no, no.
The
No,
green was
sorry.
gonna be deleted also?
yeah, so wait a minute. If you look at the draft, I don't know if I printed it out today, yes, no, wait a minute, that's the floodplain. Yeah, okay, so the groundwater one, if you look at A, it says language to be deleted. Now,
Right. And it was in
it's
red font.
everything, okay, it's everything in green italics is gonna be deleted. And the red, that continues to show up in the zoning draft. And that section in red was deleted at town meeting as part of the whole corrections. So,
So the red is already deleted and the green you're proposing to be
Right.
deleted.
but then what's curious to me is in the Bobrowski draft, he references Exhibit A and Exhibit B, the best management practices and generic substance list. But then in his notes, he deleted those documents. So, but then he referenced them in his bylaw change. So I'm a little confused by that, and I did, Sarah's, I did try to reach Sarah about it, but she's
No?
in a boat somewhere. No, Sarah Creighton. So, I need some clarity on, whether those should be exempted or not.
So for the board's discussion purposes, I think we kind of got this today, and I'm thinking that maybe we should take some time to digest this now that I understand.
I didn't mean to, just because my name's on it. So,
I can strike it.
no. So one, we never discussed changing and bringing up the groundwater bylaw, so I'm not sure where that came about. When I brought up the aquifer overlay bylaw, and I have an email out to Steve Gang to get further clarification of specifically what the water task force is looking for, because they did a lot of analysis, wanting to increase the buffer around Gravelly Pond and/or having a big loop around Gravelly and Round Pond. That's what I'm talking about, specifying the land around our water source for protection, and whether that's the
Yeah.
town buying land, or trying to get the other neighboring towns to adopt bylaws to help protect our water supply. It wasn't changing our groundwater, and I think we kind of put that to the side because we didn't like the direction Bobrowski was going, so I wouldn't necessarily go off of his draft.
And I think the areas that you're describing are under some sort of conservation restriction anyway, but I understand about the enlargement.
Yeah, and so you've actually probably know way more than I do, because you've been at those meetings, that yes, and they have
Right.
maps out on the town website of,
Where,
proposals.
Yeah.
So that's what I was talking about, and I think that would merit a conversation with the water task force.
It's disbanded, but maybe with Steve Gang.
Yeah.
I
Is there-
will, I'll,
Well, there was a report at the end of the task force, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And that's
So
one of their
basically, we can look at that and say, okay, this is what we need to beef up, and that can be incorporated in any revision.
Yes, I don't know if you were proposing this for the fall town meeting. I think it would be a lot.
Yeah, no, it's too much for the full.
Right.
It's too late.
I think they're two different ones.
I personally think it might make sense, but there aren't.
No, I think that if what Mary was talking
Yeah,
about, in my
yeah,
opinion, I think it should be its own separate one for our drinking water.
Versus the groundwater.
Groundwater.
Yeah, I would, but again, I
Surface
would
water.
defer to the scientist on that one.
So let's,
Ron? I just wanted clarification, Christina, what are you talking about, the difference between drinking water and ground or surface water? Could you just explain that a little bit more? I didn't understand.
So I think this purpose of this one is areas of town, and I think the other one is specifically for drinking water. The models that
But
I've.
this says ground and surface water resource protection, so.
Correct, so that's like a recharge. The other is actually specifically protecting gravelly and round
Around.
ponds, or like putting bigger protections around the drinking water supply.
So I guess we could, I mean, that might be a change to the maps. But I think if you're protecting water, you know, I don't know, I mean, it's worth a conversation with
I've
the water
had a
protection
quick
task force.
conversation with Steve Gang about it, but I mean, it's a problem because we don't own it, so we can't protect.
Understood.
So I think that's why it almost needs to be,
Why don't I try to get Steve Gang in here for, talk on that sometime in the future, I'll do that.
if I'm not mistaken, there's part of this that actually should be lifted over near Woodland. Is that the right year? Off of Pine, there was a lot of storm work done, and that whole neighborhood is still in this district, but it shouldn't be. So maybe you can have a chat with Chuck Dam, because I think their building requirements over there are extremely stringent because these rules still apply, but the work has been done to reduce the flooding over there, so I don't think it actually applies anymore.
So our
Well,
purpose
no,
in
that's
this
the
is
flood
what?
control
What is our
district.
purpose here?
Well, we're trying to protect the groundwater.
Right, I understand that,
So-
but what would our plan of action be to solve this problem as the planning board?
Well, I think the planning board can rezone the
Okay.
overlay district.
Okay,
And if, depending on what, I guess, Steve or peer review or whatever we decide to get expert information on, that, whatever the board thinks is the best way to kind of determine that, is the way I would
I can
look
talk
at
with
it.
Chuck too, and
Yeah, and there was another
See.
thing you mentioned, you said that something was illegal in this.
Well,
and what
in
does
the
that mean?
present bylaw, there's language about, remember we had that A&R plan on, was it Windermere Park? And,
Pleasant Street, I think.
pardon?
I think it was Pleasant
Was
Street.
School Street and
Pleasant.
Windermere?
I thought it was Pleasant Street.
Maybe it doesn't matter for the
Yeah,
purposes of
But
the discussion.
anyhow, there was the planning board had an A&R in front of them, and part of the property was in the groundwater supply district, and there was a whole debate as to whether the planning board could sign it or not. And this, the original bylaw was put in like the 1980s, and there's certain elements of it that are not legal.
Could you maybe pose that to town council?
It's already been done.
And was there an answer?
He basically got the draft of the groundwater overlay district, and with the questions of,
Has he opined on it?
not yet.
Ron?
Mary?
I would suggest, since this is gonna be a big one, the groundwater, the overlay, coordinating with the water task force, Chuck Dam, new maps, like, this is a whole separate project, and maybe we, at some point, discuss what our big projects are and what the priority is with this. Because I think we're going off on a tangent that we need to focus on floodplain and,
Well, that's next.
others. But I think it's, to do it right, it's a lot of things encompassed to, so, yeah.
Laura?
Starting with the recommendations of the task force is the right place to start. I don't see the use in spending more time on the language in here until we start with the science that's in the recommendations of the task force. And then once we know that, I think we're gonna need both some legal and some scientific consulting here to make sure that we're actually protecting the things that we're trying to protect. Because we could very easily get drawn into discussions about, are we trying to, what's the goal? Flood protection, water protection, I mean, these are all kind of parts of the same thing, but if it needs to be watershed focused, I would say that as the high level goal. So let's get a watershed focused regulation when the time is right, but let's start with the recommendations of the people who've done the work.
All right, I would make this a lower priority as opposed to the
Okay.
floodplain and the,
Okay.
but I don't know if the board agrees, but the flood and the data would be a higher
Mhm.
priority. All right, thanks. So fall town meeting discussion, so this is something, and Sarah's not here, and maybe you know, Chris, but anyway, she wanted something on the ADU section 4.2, add family member 2-4 employee, but she's not here. I mean, we can put a hold on this till next meeting.
Yeah, I think we
Figure out
probably
what
should.
she means.
I think this whole issue is definitional as much as anything, and we just have to clarify what we mean by these different unit types.
Okay.
So when Sarah brought up that issue, I ended up contacting, this was about 2 weeks ago or after the last planning board meeting. I contacted the building inspector and the assessor to see how they tracked ADUs. And that's when we ended up getting into this whole discussion about, well, they're being tracked kind of oddly.
Well, they're being permitted as employee housing in off-site locations as opposed to ADUs, and that's what's
Right,
causing this,
right.
So like a loophole.
yeah.
What I remember was a reference to Sarah Mellish in the ZBA making a request that if we added family member to for employee, because people were calling, their mother-in-laws employees so that they could house them. So I think that
Yeah, that's what it was.
it was a clarification requested from the ZBA, and we should confirm that once Sarah's back, but that's what I recall.
So I think Sarah, and we'll talk when she gets back, wants to put this on the
The
fall town meeting. So let's discuss that when she's back, if we wanna go.
But I think we can tie this all into what Mary's talking about and at least come up with the correct terminology for these things so they can be properly tracked.
If, I was looking today at the memo Betsy did on timing. And it looks as, unless I'm misreading it, it looks as though we need to post our notice a week from today for the first public hearing on whatever we're going to present for the November meeting. So that,
I
Yes.
still don't have confirmation that we have a November town meeting.
Yeah,
Well, that's, so we could post something.
on the it has to be by the 21st.
This
And
would be on
then,
senior housing, you're talking
well,
about?
whatever.
This would be on anything that
We
we,
need to post, so we need to identify which issues we're going to put before town meeting and post next Monday, and then the first hearing has to be September 11th,
yeah,
which is 3 weeks.
don't look at me like that.
So,
This is all.
well, I wasn't prepared for that. We're not ready to, are we ready to?
Well,
Point,
so we
whatever.
have floodplain, potentially ADU, and senior housing.
Well, let's get back to that after we talk about the floodplain, why don't we do that and see if we wanna go forward with that. I think we wanna
Hello.
continue.
Good.
Gail.
Yeah,
Ms. Gale?
I believe that I asked Greg about the fall town meeting, and the most recent information I received was the beginning of November.
Right.
So we don't need to post by Monday, September 11th.
But that memo, you
Well-
laid out the steps.
We
And
actually
back
do,
up.
because if there's further discussion and we continue to the last meeting in September,
But we could schedule another meeting.
right, but the warrant closes,
Here's the memo,
Um,
Ron.
You'd have 2 meetings in October, and likely the first meeting in November. So you would have continuances.
I would suggest we don't post anything until we get confirmation from our town administrator that we're having a meeting.
Exactly.
I mean, we're preempting something we don't know.
Agreed.
It's like September 11th, and that's scheduled. All right, let's talk about this floodplain map and then put out some kind of outline of what, if anything, we wanna move forward with. And then we can kinda distill everything into public hearings.
okay.
So on the floodplain, bylaw, you sent us something today,
Yeah,
draft.
and so originally we had talked about doing this after the floodplain maps were confirmed, which is going to be December or January of next year. or December of this year, January of next year. So Mary has continued to push about getting a much better bylaw in place. So what I have done is I've drafted, Faye did some research for me on what other communities have done. And there's a couple of communities on the North Shore that have actually looked at kind of future floodplain areas. So the municipal vulnerability plan for the town, there's been a whole bunch of studies about the future impact of downtown and floodplain areas. So the present draft the present language in the bylaw is actually quite weak.
So that's all this stuff you.
That's all the green,
You wanna pull all that green out.
So the
and put
green existing language, and the whole reason I'm putting existing language in there is so people can do a comparison. And they know what the existing language is. And then what I did was I went through Faye's notes on what other communities have done. And I drafted up, and I also looked at Bobrowski's draft. And I came up with a proposed change. Now, the state had always said to me, well, it's gonna take us a while to figure this out and, we'll work with you for spring town meeting. And that's the original town meeting that I was aiming for, or I was recommending to this board. I have talked with the person at the state. The person at the state has this language, and they are willing to fast track it for fall town meeting.
Okay. Have we looked at this and has anybody
Well, you
looked
just
at
got
this?
it,
Yeah,
but as I
so,
said in my staff memo,
Yeah,
there's no worries because you're not gonna be really required to comment on it for another month.
Well, what if we have to have a public hearing on September 11th?
That's a month from now, isn't it?
but we would need to advertise it for one public.
And wouldn't we wanna,
How about, I'm sorry. Is there a possibility to have a subcommittee meet on this, so we can actually comment and talk about it before then? So we're not stuck working on this?
Good. They're interested in forming a subcommittee on this?
I mean, we can't share notes, so to push this off and then fast track it to fall town meeting, I think it wouldn't be.
Well, I had a couple of questions, comments. I didn't have much time to read it extensively, but I guess my first question would be, since this is highly Concom, have you coordinated with them and discussed with them the floodplain bylaw?
I have talked with Chris about it, their agent.
So
I
I
have
think
not
it's,
talked with Bayan about it.
I think it's very important that Concom is involved in this process. I know the select board is working on a new governance project and people need to collaborate before rather than after. I don't need to go in detail at this meeting necessarily, but the state only recommends like, I don't know, there's like 6 definitions and this has like pages and pages and pages of definitions. I would reduce a lot of the definitions and I think there was just things that were missing that I would add. And
What?
so a lot of this is just strictly cutting and pasting from the floodplain model.
Not really. I looked at I had Faye look at 6 or 8 different towns.
Well, but what's being proposed is basically a cut and paste from the floodplain bylaw.
No.
we could discuss that at another point, but, so just some of the things where, like, these need to be on file with the town clerk and the planning board, building official, Concom, and others, and I just don't see that listed in here. There was text for the, oh no, I found that. There's, a lot of towns have sections for Conservation Commission and what their district duties are. There's a section, the state highlights that they want, what our town's enforcement regulations are referring to this, so they kind of want the steps laid out and what forms are used and things like that, and so, I think that needs to be added. Just some suggestions from other towns that have health regulations in this, kind of what the Board of Health needs to do with, say, septic systems in the floodplain. So, I mean, just some things I would remove, some things I would add.
Okay.
But yeah, I would definitely like Concom involved.
Who's our Concom rep?
I am. Chris Bertoni, the agent, what did she say, Betsy? I mean, typically Concom's jurisdiction is wetlands and wetland bordering vegetated areas, so that's not flood.
Right.
So what jurisdiction would they have? I mean, I think that would be a new definition of the jurisdiction that the state gives to the Concom. Not that they don't have expertise to contribute.
I
I'm
mean,
just
she
wondering.
said she would look at it,
Yeah.
but we didn't really get into the weeds on it.
Yeah,
So I think in
Um,
some situations, they
you know,
notify communities.
You know, there's a section on future flood risk, and says the most current version of the plans that are on file with the town clerk, the conservation agent, public works and building department. So she would be involved a little bit in kind of sea rise and where people are building, and that would be part of her involvement a little bit, because they get involved with chapter 91 a little bit.
I think until the chapter 91 boundaries change, their jurisdiction is, follows the chapter 91 boundaries. I don't disagree that Concom might have expertise here, but I don't believe they currently have jurisdiction over flood zones versus wetlands and wetland bordering.
They don't have
areas.
jurisdiction, but they're involved. Like,
Yeah.
they notify neighboring communities of some of the, what's the word? That riverine or,
Riparian.
what is it?
Riparian.
Fluvial and riparian.
Yeah,
So,
Laura?
all your administrative comments, Mary, I think are relevant, to the actual final document, but I think we need to get at the substance of what are we trying to do with the flood control district? What is the design flood that we are aiming for? And maybe the best source of that is the coastal flood, coastal zone management plan that had modeling. But I really think that the design storm that we're working to and where the areas are that are flooding has to be the substance of this document as far as future flooding. We know what FEMA tells us everything historically, but for future flooding, we need to establish what that looks like,
And
where those areas are.
Yeah, I did include a reference to that, in 10.2.2.2. And it could be, so it's on page 4, the bottom of page 4. And it could actually include a bunch of other documents that could also be referenced.
So, in this 10.2.2, there's a bunch of dates in here. Do we need to constantly update this bylaw? I mean, these dates change every year, don't they? Or
Okay,
how do we
the
keep current?
10.2.2.1, which are the floodplain, the FEMA floodplain maps, those are gonna change in December of this year or January of next year. So then,
This will all be, will be
that
different.
is gonna have to, if you take this to fall town meeting, then you're gonna have to go back in spring town meeting and change that reference because they're reworking the plans. Which is why we were originally I was encouraging heading to,
Is there any urgency, does the board feel there's any
Springtown
urgency to
meeting.
do this, this fall? Or should we wait till these FEMA maps come out? Hearing that maybe that's a better plan.
Well, my
Yeah.
urgency is that we've been out of compliance with the state for 2+ years, and they set out 3 criteria of when these should be updated, and we haven't done any of them. So I think it is a priority to be in compliance with the state and have all of the regulations and the floodplain administrator and all that type of detail in it. To do that as opposed to start adding other bylaws that are kind of nice to haves, but we're out of compliance in other areas, so.
well, and the other thing is the existing bylaw doesn't have any oversight. There's no floodplain coordinator, there's no special permit grantor, there's,
And I believe you get, so we're a NFIP community town, and if we're not in compliance, we could lose that, so we wouldn't have flood insurance.
Okay, so
Residents
I'm
would.
not adverse to moving forward with this, but I just don't wanna tax that. We've got cell signaling, we've got MBTA, we've got some things here that are taxing us. Just
May I ask a question? So for getting at that, Ron, so are there specific clauses, Betsy, that we can add that will bring us into compliance? I know that we can have a lot of discussion about what's called future flood risk district. Future flood risk district is probably not even the right term, it's more about the percent chance of flooding, not that it's a future flood necessarily, but it might be 1 in 100%. That might be different for sea level rises versus inland flooding, we can get into a lot of specificity here. But to address Mary's concern and make sure that, property is insurable according to FEMA, what is that narrow definition that we need to do to meet that requirement? Maybe we could tackle this in the fall
right,
meeting.
so what I did was I sent this to the state floodplain coordinator.
Okay,
And they work at DCR, they're gonna get back to me by the end of the week with
Okay.
any changes they want.
maybe that's the place to start.
That's where I've started,
Great.
so.
And would they include, are they including things like future flood district, or is that our piece, knowing that, we've done these sea level rise
So a
studies
number
and
of
so forth?
communities, because of this of everybody along the North Shore doing sea rise level studies, a lot of communities have included a future floodplain area. So Gloucester, Swampscott, there's somebody else. Might have been Ipswich, but
Okay,
this seems to be, I didn't think you could do it. And I talked with Greg Catamatori, who is the planning director in Gloucester, and he said that Gloucester really pushed it and was allowed to do it.
Oh, that's right.
why don't we do this, why don't we look at what we need to do to be in compliance for this fall town meeting and then readdress it again in the spring with these changes when we get the FEMA information, how's that?
That's the question, does the town need to vote on the FEMA maps? So I don't think that's not gonna be relevant. We're not gonna have to change it.
They do in the spring, because what would happen is,
You
we'd get our
define
new
these.
FEMA maps, and then we'd have to switch out the language on page
10.2.
10.2.2.1, on page 4.
So Ron, and just to answer your question, and Betsy will find out maybe differently, but to be in compliance means to adopt the model floodplain.
Well, but
How can we
we ended up looking at the model floodplain, and we looked at like 5 or 6 or 8 different communities along here. Swampscott, Salem, Beverly, Gloucester, Ipswich, and somebody, might have been Rowley. And a lot of those communities did not adopt the model word by word.
No, you just need the sections, yeah, you don't
Yeah.
need it word by
Yeah.
word, you just need the sections, yeah.
So,
So those would be.
so when I get feedback from this guy at the state, I will provide you with what he's suggested,
Can I
That
ask a
should be
question about this? This-
Thursday or Friday.
This is awfully weedy here, but, so how do we know we're in compliance again? So do we submit the approved bylaw to the state and then they tell us, yes, you're in compliance?
No. Now, the way it works is that we submit to the state and the state basically reviews it with us. It goes to town meeting, it gets voted, and then when the floodplain maps get provided to the town, we have the preliminary floodplain maps now, and those maps, FEMA wants comments on those maps by the beginning of October.
I
So,
guess that's not my question,
so
So-
once the FEMA maps are adopted, there's a requirement that the FEMA maps the revised FEMA maps have to be adopted within 6 months of their providing us those maps.
so when you submitted this last week or wherever to the state,
Yeah,
is that the formal submission asking for compliance?
no, I was asking him to review
The language.
the language to see if this would bring us closer to compliance.
So I wanna go back to my
What's the
question.
steps to get this model accepted? Is it detailed?
It's the same thing.
The model bylaw?
Yeah.
So
What are the
the
steps?
state issues a model bylaw. From what I can see, none of the communities that we looked at adopted every element of the model bylaw.
Oh.
So that's why I submitted it to the guy at the state
So how
and
far different is our existing bylaw from the model bylaw?
hugely different.
Out of compliance.
No,
So,
I mean, there's no floodplain administrator, there's no person who oversees floodplain variances, there's nobody who oversees minor development in a floodplain. There's a lot of stuff that's missing that is recommended in the model.
so why don't we, move forward with that, see what you get back from the state on what you've submitted. Laura, if you can contact Concom and just make them aware of what we're doing, if they wanna opine on any of this.
I mean,
I don't think they
I
need
can
to.
send copies to Steve Gang and Olga and
Oh, okay.
you know, that whole crew and just say, planning board is looking at either fall town meeting or spring town meeting
Okay,
to-
so you'll take care of that.
and
Okay.
I'll copy you on it.
So I just have a question. So I'm at this 10.2. So the town does need to vote on these maps.
Yes,
All right, but we just said no like a minute ago. So I just wanted, is there language that we can just say the most relevant map or we actually need to vote on the map?
you have to vote on the specific map they give you.
Okay, so do we know, have you done like an overlay? Have we seen, are the boundaries actually gonna change?
I don't know.
We have the maps, did you compare
So the
them?
maps are downstairs, they're the preliminary maps.
Right,
And our comment period is until the beginning of October.
okay. Can I make a suggestion maybe that you send these things to Steve and Olga and Concom and Bion and then set up a meeting maybe in 2 weeks? And those of us who would like to join, we all can collaborate in a posted meeting on this, so we don't wait a month until we meet again.
Okay.
Is that reasonable?
Board okay with that, Laura?
I'm looking for clarification on what we're voting on, I think it's the language of the bylaw. The map is something that FEMA produces.
Right.
We don't take a position on that, I mean, we may have comments on it in draft form, but at the end of the day, the town doesn't decide whether it likes the map or not, I mean, that is the FEMA map,
Right,
right?
and
So
FEMA
we're voting to include, we're voting on a regulation that makes a reference to the map that FEMA
Right.
has produced.
Right.
Not on the map itself.
So FEMA
You
requires
just went
that,
back again. Now you just said we don't have to vote on the map.
No,
I
I was just asking for
misunderstood what you
clarification.
said, the map,
Vote on the
I
bylaw.
said before, the map has to be voted at Springtown meeting.
I think that's different than what you just said to Laura.
I've said repeatedly, the map is gonna be finalized in December of 2023 or January 2024. The town has 6 months to adopt the maps.
That just
By
means
adopting the
incorporating,
map means you reference the map in the bylaw,
Right.
that's what happens.
that means we just change this language.
Right.
We don't vote on, well, no, you need to move it over here a little bit, no, we're not gonna vote on the mapping.
They're doing the mapping, they're providing you with the mapping.
Right.
We're just switching out the maps.
Okay, so let's sum up what we're doing here. You're gonna get feedback on language from the state. And then on this model adoption. And we're gonna move forward with possibly a sub-meeting here with, who would like to participate in that meeting?
What's the purpose of a meeting?
I guess to align what the,
Have a conversation with Bion, Concom, I mean, in more relevant time than a month from now.
Regarding the language of the proposed bylaw,
Correct.
will we have it in time? Will we have it for next meeting? I was thinking of canceling next meeting, but can we have it in 2 weeks, the language?
What?
You have the language in front of you, this draft anyhow.
Or-
Do we, in an effort to have one meeting in August, which is what we set out to do, can we let Betsy go through her process of hearing back from the state? And then distributing it to everybody, and then if we think a meeting is necessary to meet then at that point, so we're talking about that draft that the state has reviewed. And I think it's related to land uses, we can ask Bion if he's interested, I don't know what the,
I mean, I think
yeah.
as a community, this community should have the maps, the preliminary floodplain maps in front of them and comment on them, or at least somebody needs to look at them. I mean, I ended up reviewing them with Bion at one point, but we never came up with a series of recommendations.
What would the recommendations be? I mean, it's,
That, there's some areas that flood more than what those maps indicate. There's some places that perhaps flood a little less. I don't know.
All right, well, I like that idea that you came up with. Let's see what if you can distribute to the board what you find out, and then let's review it, and the board, if you guys wanna meet, we will, otherwise we'll just review it and make comments back to you, I guess.
Well, why doesn't everybody wait until I
Yeah,
get comments back from the state?
Yeah, when you
Yeah.
get comments back from the state, we'll distribute
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. Cell signaling update, any news on their permit filing and where we stand on consultants?
So, I've had several discussions or emails from, Mark Glovsky, who's the attorney for cell signaling. He would like to get a copy of the zoning bylaw that's been updated. The town clerk did update the zoning bylaw from the June special town meeting. And so I haven't had a chance to look at that, but what I'm hoping to,
Is that available
Well,
for us to get?
she's making the assumption that the AG's office will approve that.
Can we get copies of it, or?
Yeah, I can send out copies, but they'll,
Well, I mean, I don't know if everyone wants one, but I do.
I do, oh, yes.
Okay, so, yes, you can get us distribution on what's done, and
okay,
probably have to wordsmith it again.
yeah.
So it's a draft,
It's a draft,
okay, we're good with letting that out,
it'll be noted as draft.
thank you.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
This is the zoning that we've all approved, right? So, it's a draft in the sense that it needs to be finalized by the AG. I'm questioning what the wordsmithing would be. Why would we change anything?
Well, no, going forward, if we found something in it that says, for the next meeting, we may have to say 5.1 instead of 5, there may be some additional, I would think.
Let's hope not.
Yeah.
Let's hope not, we got so much else to do. Are we asking for hard copies or
I would like a hard
E-copies.
copy. If not,
Oh,
that'd be
okay.
great.
hard
As
copies?
opposed to electronic version?
Well,
Okay,
because,
I can give you
look
hard
it up.
copies.
Hard copy would be great, so long as it's sort of, that's why I was asking the question about continuing to not put our pencils down, because if it's using our sort of draft reference copy, and we know it's gonna be,
Yeah, no,
stamped
it's
by
good
the
to have the
AG,
right
then
numbers when we're
it's
looking
useful.
at stuff now and moving forward, it's all been changed, so it would be good to have copies to the board.
And it's completely incorporated, or is it just what was approved?
Hmm?
Is it completely incorporated, or is it just what was approved?
Should be
is it the
complete.
full section
The
of
Should be
the,
the
full set of
Should be
bylaws.
The
the
whole
Yeah,
zoning
right.
bylaw.
It's the whole thing.
Yeah, I
that
would
would
like
be
it.
useful.
Yeah, so hard copies for the
Terrific.
board, and I guess we'll come pick them up whenever she's got them ready.
So we'll copy them and they'll be available on Thursday.
And any word from Glovsky on when they might submit yet?
My understanding was the end of August, the beginning of September.
Almost there. Okay. And, so for process, they're gonna submit the permit and they're gonna come in and,
Well, he wants to see the zoning because he wants to go through the zoning to fully understand, what's needed.
but there's a ticking clock once he submits, correct?
Yes, so there's 65 days for the board to hold a public hearing once it's been submitted. And you can continue that meeting for as long as you need to collect data.
And that would eliminate the 65-day rule.
No. You have 65 days to hold the public hearing.
Right.
So say you start the public hearing on 60, the 60th day.
So let's say he submits September 1.
Okay,
So
So-
you got September and you got October
okay,
to hold a public
pretty
hearing.
pretty much. So, but how it works is that you open the public hearing and then you can continue to a date certain.
So it stops the clock.
That's
So
what I'm asking.
it actually continues the clock. Because, okay, so he files on September 1. You have your hearings, you open the hearing September 15th. You continue it to October 15th. You continue it to November 15th. You continue it to January 8th. You can keep continuing it as long as when you're talking about it, and you can continue it as long as you vote to continue it in a public session to a time and date certain.
Right. Now my next question.
And then once you close the public hearing, then you have, it gets a little confusing because you have technically 90 days to file a decision, but if in the discussion around the time you close the public hearing, you make a decision, that decision has to be filed within 2 weeks.
So, can I ask a question about public hearing? So there's stormwater we may want testimony on, there may be safety we want testimony on, roads and things. Is this public hearing gonna be split up by subjects?
I think that's up to the board how you wanna do it. So,
When do these, say if we want a peer review of for instance, I'm not speaking for the board, but we want a peer review of the drainage or.
so
So does that happen to us first and then to the public? Or is that in all encompassing in the public hearing? Or-
That's all encompassing in the public hearing,
So
because
the peer
everybody has,
reviewer- The peer reviewer and the
everybody
public
has
will
to-
all hear this.
everybody has to know about it.
Well, do you remember the 40B? The 40B was a special permit. That the
Yes,
zoning
and then
board
it was broken up by, today we're gonna discuss transportation.
So that's,
Today
we
we're
can
gonna-
do that if we want to.
Yeah,
Okay,
so,
so
It's the
that's
same
what, that's
process.
why I was asking about this clock business, because we may wanna have, today's public hearing is on the drain.
Sure.
We have the peer review.
right, or it's on traffic, or you may need two for traffic.
Okay.
Or
All right, I
you
got
may
it.
need, so,
Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
So we'll need to line up.
yeah, so I'm in the process of developing a list of peer reviewers.
You've been saying that now,
I can get you the list, okay?
Yeah, I mean, I think we would like to look at those sooner than later.
Hmm?
Yeah, I think as much information,
Okay,
I don't think there's too much information you can share with us. The other thing is, I was gonna suggest the Hamilton Town Planner, I think he did a really good job with that senior housing special permit, which may be a little bit different than the 40B, might track a little bit better with this project. See how they outlined that one, just if you
mean
need
the
some.
process.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not familiar with it, what did they do?
It was a 50-unit, high-end senior housing and it abutted some wetlands. I mean, it was, I followed it a little bit just because it was right near the water source.
Mhm.
But they did exactly what Ron was saying, had a timeline, this is what we're discussing, this,
It's exactly what 40B did. Sorry you weren't there.
I was there, but thanks, Gail.
Well, I mean, that's exactly how that process went.
40Bs are
So
still,
that's kind of.
Ron?
Laura.
Thank you. Betsy, when you're listing consultants, could we ask, maybe one of these topics has to do with sustainability, resiliency, how they're protecting water quality, how they're protecting or enhancing habitat, how they're managing for flood control, kind of a thematic
Mm-hmm.
look at that, I think would be one area of interest and focus for us.
Oh,
Thank you.
and I don't think these emails were forwarded, the emails to Sarah Melish on FinCom with the financial consultant.
Did everyone get that copy?
I don't think so, but I had reached out per the board's request to Sarah Melish for some guidance on the planning board getting a financial consultant for the cell signaling. I was just looking for if FinCom wanted to talk about it at their meeting and give us some feedback. And she said that FinCom will be reviewing whatever cell signaling cost analysis. I still think the planning board should get a financial consultant, independent, as part of the site plan and special permit process. So we're comfortable that this is a, that it abides by the site plan and special permit requirements. So we hadn't decided that yet as a board. It looks like FinCom is gonna be doing their own thing.
So what are we looking from financially? What would we be looking for from the financial consultants?
Well, I think it's something we can collaborate on, but just off the top of my head, I would say, everything from what's the tax revenue that would be coming in, what would be impact and cost on any public services, water, sewer,
Is that our purview?
absolutely.
yeah.
Okay. All right, how's the board feel about
Should we
a,
wait until we find out what FinCom says? I mean, we might be satisfied with their analysis.
it sounded like they were gonna do it pretty early in the game. I don't know when they're gonna do it.
So
So if we need to get a consultant, we need to get a consultant now as opposed to
So
halfway in the process.
we had a staff meeting to kind of get staff up to speed on what was going on with the project, and you two were there and Ron was there. The assessor has indicated that she can do the financial analysis on, what type of tax benefits. Once she gets the data on square footage costs and things like that, she's been waiting for that. They gave her some preliminary data, but she's waiting for the final stuff.
And I think that's great, I mean, that's just one piece, I mean, just like with the 40B that we're just mentioning, I mean, they had an independent consultant as well, so I just think it, you know, obviously with the biggest project that's happened in Manchester, I think we have to do the right thing.
Any comments on the board? Laura?
I'd want to have clear goals if we need a financial consultant. I'm not sure that I see the need for one, but maybe working with FinCom to say, what are you, FinCom and perhaps the assessor, what are you looking at, and are there areas outside of your look that we want to know more about, and maybe that could define what this financial consultant is going to be doing. So I'd want to know how it applies to the, you know, the physical nature of the development.
Well, it's in the new bylaws that we passed, so if we're enforcing the bylaw with the site plan and the special permit, we have to know that we have the data for that.
I think we could certainly rely on, if the FinCom hired a consultant that we were happy with, I think we could rely on that report.
They're not hiring a
It's our job to
consultant.
hire the FinCom, it's our job to hire, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I thought you
she's,
just said that they were hiring a,
no, that they're gonna take whatever
They do it
cell
themselves.
signaling gives them.
Could you ask Sarah, you know, things outside your, that area of expertise, you know, that we would maybe hire a consultant for?
Ask for areas outside of her expertise.
Yeah, that they would be commenting on, see what she says. Okay, are we good on cell signaling? Okay, and then just moving on here towards the end, MBTA Communities Update, I believe you guys have a meeting Thursday.
Yep.
that's correct.
Any comments? I know you produced a document.
Yeah, I put together a draft of frequently asked questions with
It's an excellent document, I would just,
If you would appreciate comments from people, or if there are other questions we should add.
what's your plan with that document? Is that
So I'd
gonna
like to
go?
get the task force to adopt it, and then we'll post it on their website. So that folks in the town can,
When are you looking for comments by?
as soon as possible.
Yeah, because it'd be nice to get that posted as soon as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a very, I think it's a really clear document on the
Well,
direction
A lot of
guys.
people participated in putting it together.
So we actually have a meeting on Thursday morning, Chris and Tiffany and Gail and I, to talk about what gets on the website, and we do that,
Great.
so.
Mary?
Do you want comments just emailed to you?
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay, so who put this together? There was no names on it.
Oh, so I did a lot of it, Betsy did a lot. There are a few other folks I just sort of asked.
Greg had a couple of
Greg had some
comments.
great comments on it.
So it wasn't a task force thing? it
No,
was
no,
a-
no.
No, it was just, he sent it as a draft to a couple of people
Who took
for
the pictures?
correction.
I did.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so, yeah, I'll send my comments.
Is it, where is it posted? Or not posted, but did you,
Email.
It's posted on the insurance,
for this meeting?
yeah.
Okay. Didn't see that one.
Anything else on the MBTA communities?
So Thursday, we're gonna be talking about the baseline data that Betsy has prepared, and start talking about demographics and see what else it is. I think that's it.
How's the attendance been for the task force?
Very good so far.
The only person who hasn't shown up to every meeting is the FinCom.
FinCom?
Yeah, he'll be there Thursday.
All right,
Can I ask a question on that? So what was submitted to the Office of Community and Development was that the planning board and task force were gonna meet on a monthly basis. When is that gonna start?
When would you like it to start? We could,
Well, it's not up to me, I mean, it's the task force, so, or the planning board deciding, but, you know, whether it's the first
What was the
Monday
question?
meeting or the second Monday meeting,
so we'll be starting to meet twice a month, starting in September. So I think maybe every other meeting, we could invite the planning board to attend, or you could invite us to attend
yeah,
planning board meetings, either way.
so how does the board wanna do that?
Well, when you say, you mean have all 9 people come to our meeting?
That's what Mary wants.
Yeah,
Well, that's what was, it's not what I want, it's what was submitted to the state that was part of our,
Game.
openness and how
Compliance
we're doing
document,
the, you know, open and transparent, and these are the steps that we're taking for the, this project, and so I'm asking, when's that gonna start?
Let's start that in September, once a month maybe,
Yeah, maybe
as
once a
we'll have.
And you take turns maybe flipping back and forth between attending task
That's right.
force meeting or attending planning board meeting.
Let them come.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, we're the zoning, we're the elected, yes.
I don't need to be, you know, but,
Okay.
it's not a meeting, and I don't know.
yeah, I get it.
and everyone can attend all the meetings.
Right.
And we're zooming, right?
Resuming.
So we have a little time left. Donna, you had a question between Chris and Betsy, I give you some time.
Is that okay? It's just a quick little, I'm confused between the emails that I was sending to the board with Betsy and Chris with regards to the MBTA housing, and I just wanted to just get some clarification, because I'm still kind of confused. So based on what Betsy said to me and what I've heard from other town planners in other towns, is that the DHCD in the state is requiring brand new units of housing this is all zoning related, I understand that. We're not required to build, I get that, but they gave us a number, 555 units, let's just say hypothetically. That what Chris has been telling me a lot through the emails is that once we get the zoning and the things get zoned appropriately, we can count some of the existing multifamily units that we currently have once the zoning, because I have it on email and that's what he said. And then Betsy says, no, we can't count any current multifamily units that we have in town, everything needs to be new. So I have one email on that chain that's what Betsy says, and then Chris says we can count units, Betsy says we can't count units that we currently have. So I just think from the task force or from the planning board, moving forward, it'd be really interesting if down the road we have to build units with the zoning, are we needing to build 550, or can we count the 411 or whatever within the district that you do? It's just, we either can count what we have, or we can't count at all what we have. That's my
So can I answer
clarification.
that
Yeah,
question?
Chris, you want to?
So we're both right, is the answer. Right now, there are a whole lot of multifamily units in the downtown.
Right,
Most of them are not allowed by our current zoning, so we can't count them.
correct.
So let's say there was a 10-unit building that, and let's say that our zoning changed and said we would allow 9 units by right on that kind of lot. So we could count 9 units, but we can't count 10, even though there are 10 there.
So that would be different than so
No, I think Betsy would agree that if, what we're counting are the number of units allowed by right.
oh, no, I completely understand what you're saying, it's just, in Betsy's email to me, it says, we can't, even with the zoning change, we can't count any, based on her email, any existing units. They want new units. So if you says it's 9 on this plot of land, and there's 10, but we can only count 9, you're counting 9 towards the 555 number.
That's
So
correct.
now we're down to 549.
Yep.
And I don't want to speak, I'm just reading from your email for me, so I'm just confused, and from 2 other town planners. They want brand new units of housing, is what I'm getting from you. So I just want people to understand, I need to understand, because that changes the game, right? If we have to build 555 units, the density, the cars, the people, it changes, or we build 200.
No, so,
I'm just,
Or we change the zoning so that it allows certain areas by right.
right?
So most of the units that are multifamily units in town which are 3 or more units, most of those units were either pre-existing non-conforming, they were
Yes.
built back in
Nope, get it?
1900 or whatever, or they went to the zoning board for zoning relief.
Right, that's not my question. My question is, you said that we needed brand new units. That's what your email said, so that's why I was confused with the clip. I know what you're saying, I understand what you're saying, but then when she says, we can't count anything, even with the zoning, we need new units, you can see how I got confused. Does that make sense? You guys even?
But I think his explanation is that if we changed the zoning
Right,
to allow something by right,
correct.
then you can count those units.
It's not the
Okay, I'm just
units,
thinking,
it's
your
not-
response to me was completely different, saying we can't count, even with the change in the zoning,
well,
we can't count the units.
I think it's even with the change in zoning part, that maybe you misunderstood.
That's why I was confused, that's the only reason why I just wanted clarification, because that's what you sent me, I have the email with me, I printed
Yeah.
it, because I was trying to be like, why am I so confused with the two people that, like, you know what I mean, so I just
Yeah.
wanted to
Well,
understand.
here's another twist. So I've been asking for a while, for the last like 6 months or so, whether, so the state has these guidelines, and then they have excluded properties from what you cannot include
Right.
in your MBTA housing area. So one of the things I've asked the state, and I've asked them repeatedly, and I finally asked the second in command, I said, are filled tidelands excluded? Because you've excluded wetlands,
Right.
floodplain, marshes, a whole bunch of different things are excluded, town-owned land, federal land, but are filled marshlands excluded? And from my analysis of the zoning, filled tidelands are excluded, well, filled tidelands require a special permit from this board. So then it's not by right, so filled tidelands would be something that would not be allowed. But the state hasn't come forth to say whether filled tidelands are excluded or not.
Just as a point of reference, Phil Tidelands is a good portion of Boston. I mean, Boston would be a little
Yeah,
pinhead on a neck if we didn't allow things on Phil, and so
Right.
would much of Cambridge.
Well, Cambridgeport and
Cambridge is
Riverside would
mostly
be.
Phil Tidelands, so it's worth getting some
But that's,
clarification on that.
when the DHCD state, even on the call that I was on with them many months ago, said that we already have buildings that are on built tidelands
Sure,
here
we
in
do.
downtown, and the DHCD said that you, like, we could file to say we can't build here, and they said that's not an.
Well, I haven't heard that from them, per se.
It was, so, whether, I don't know, it was Sarah or somebody else, it was a
Town
big
council
call
said it.
for the THCD, and the lawyer said it as well, so from KP Law at one of the meetings, and they said because we already have existing buildings and structures here on filled tidelands, that would not be something that we would be able to fight with regards to the state. So that was something that, again, that wasn't my original question, I don't really necessarily know. It was just more just trying to understand, because I think a number is really important for the people, because they get scared to think if we could count, like Chris says, like if we can with the zoning, count some of these that makes things just so much better than feeling so daunting that we might have to potentially, at complete build out, do 550 units throughout the community. So that's why I was just confused with how it was phrased in both emails.
It's like you have
Can I
another frequently asked question.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's one of them.
To-
It's one
of
To your
it is one of them.
Okay.
Because aren't you looking at the development capacity of each lot, not the existing structure on it?
Yes,
So
exactly.
that's the math that you need to do to get to five. It's not whether it's
Exactly.
new or existing, it's just about the capacity of the lot.
Exactly,
Mhm.
and so
And I
there's
think it's
no-
also worth clarifying that it's not a mandate to build anything, it's
That's
a
right.
zoning
Exactly.
overlay,
So even if we allowed 555 units, only a certain number are ever gonna get built. And maybe none, for that matter, who knows?
So those are some good
No, it's just
frequently asked
great.
questions, just to clarify. I think.
Absolutely, and I can't wait till you put it up on the website, I'm sure you have lots of information that will be great for me to read, so I appreciate it, thank you, Ron, very much.
Okay.
I actually have two more, like for the meeting, I'm unable to attend. One question I've had, so if I'm actually right on the verge of the half mile, so just say we did a circle about the half mile. I have close to 3/4 an acre, if I'm in within the half a mile, and that is the district. Can I build a fraction of the 15? Do we know that answer?
Well, yeah,
We
well,
haven't zoned that area.
so.
No, just, well, I'm in a half a mile.
Well, here's what happens. We have to create 35, 37, 39 acres of a district that allows these things.
Correct.
It may or may not include your.
Oh, no, I understand, but just say I am in a district and I have what my district requires. So I don't have an acre, my district doesn't require an acre, there's very few districts that require more than an acre.
Okay,
So if mine is 60,000 square feet, can I build a fraction of what that by right is? Does that make sense? So can I, say it's 15, and I have a half an acre, just for easy math, can I build 7, is my question.
If we
So-
word the zoning that way, yes, you'd be able to do it, but we'd have to make that clear in the zoning bylaw that you could do it.
And then my other question was, is there somewhere in your conversation about the historical district? Because we did talk about our initial,
It's excluded, I believe, right?
So, no, it's not excluded,
No,
but
it's
we
not.
can do historic review of historically
Well,
significant
that was
buildings.
restricted.
so my question was,
think
wait,
so.
just cut me off, so when, early on when we started talking bylaws, I'm not sure if you were here, but Bobrowski entertained the idea of a tear down and everyone dismissed it,
Demolition delay.
yes.
Demolition delay, that is something we could do also.
So I would maybe like for you guys to bring that up and see what the
Sure,
comments
yes.
are about that.
Yeah, that's one of the frequently asked questions.
It was on that?
Yeah,
Oh, I didn't see that. I must have read it too quickly.
Well, yeah, so it was yours or Betsy's that basically said, we don't have any protections for the
Yeah.
historic district,
That's right.
so,
My memo said
so if
but
the
that doesn't mean
historic
we can't
district,
create them. We
if
could
the
create them.
historic district is in a zone, they can just be taken down and,
Today,
Yeah.
they could be.
yes.
Absolutely.
So yes, and we, like, I think it was yours that had the two, you know, the National Registry and our local historic district, and so yeah, we need some protections.
Well, it's interesting, cause I'm hearing more and more about buildings that are potentially coming down.
Oh,
In
yeah,
town,
I think we all are.
Yeah,
in town?
there's
Yeah,
a
we should,
house on Bennett Street that probably is gonna come down, and it's probably one of the oldest houses in town. And then I'm also hearing rumor that, the World
Cargo.
War II observation tower may be coming down.
Jeez, for what, to build something else?
I guess so,
a tennis court, probably.
maybe a swimming pool.
Cargo, that.
Huh?
Anything on it? Laura?
Off topic, number one. Number two, we have, it's true that historic designations don't protect you unless you do a
Demo
demo
delay.
delay, and we can look at that. But it's not, again, we need to separate this from the multifamily housing being the thing that's gonna lead to tear downs. It's already happening, right? So
Yes.
people are tearing down smaller houses to build bigger ones with by right, one family housing. So I just wanna, please make sure when you do these FAQs that you, let's just be clear and keep things separate about, you know, there's not a cause and effect here. There is just, here are the risks and here are the, you know, opportunities. But I don't want all these things to get conflated because we're looking at this, that means, you know, more tear downs or something like that.
That's really important.
Well, I would dispute that somewhat, because if you're saying it's a single family and all you can do is tear it down and build a single family, and if you change it and say, you can tear it down and build 15 single families, right? A developer is gonna lunge on that, whereas he or she wouldn't today. So I think there is a cause and effect, there's gonna be a cause and effect no matter what bylaws we change, so we have to look at all of those. That's just thinking beyond the pushing something through, it's looking at all the intended and unintended consequences, it's important.
Ron,
Laura?
Please look at the side of the room every once in a while.
This is your blindsided. Last time I sat there, I had the same
So
problem.
I'm gonna make the point again that, you know, the things that are happening by right can happen now. And I just wanna look at, you know, let's look at the numbers, let's get the, you know, what exists today in terms of units, and then let's look at what's possible and map that. But I wanna be careful not to conflate the issues that this zoning district is gonna lead to tear downs. Tear downs are happening now, and they can happen by right, and you can build a larger house to the extent that your zoning, that your parcel will allow it. And that will continue to happen with single family, and we're not suggesting that we change that. I mean, there's nothing that we're doing now that's suggesting that we change that unless we do something in the historic district with an overlay. So, I'll stop there, but I just,
Good point.
Well, make that known at your committee,
No, it's-
and if it comes up.
Well,
Okay. Thank you, we'll look forward to your meeting Thursday. Liaison committees, task force working groups, so there, Sarah told me there's a senior housing bylaw, subcommittee meeting on the 23rd at 4 p.m. Are you aware? Okay. So you'll post, someone will post?
Yes, it's kind of posted.
The select board, I listened to that meeting, they changed this harbor management plan to an advisory group, so I don't know, Sarah's not here to report on that, but I think they changed what their criteria are. CPC, we're meeting on the 24th of August. Any other liaison working group updates from anyone?
I've been going to the zoning board of appeals meetings. I don't know that there's anything important to report.
A couple of members?
No tear downs?
Oh,
Okay,
maybe.
all right, anybody else? Approval of regular minutes, Gail, you have the 6:26 and 7:24, is that correct? Gail still with us?
That's correct.
I'll take a motion on June 26th meeting for approval.
motion to approve.
So moved. So seconded.
So I have a question. So there was my concern about the MBTA task force, and it's not the bylaw, it's the state law.
Make that change, Gail. State
I'll
law.
edit that, no problem.
Motion for approval as amended?
Sure.
Yeah, but that was 7:24.
Yeah, so-
No, 6:26. This is 6:26, Christina first. On 6:26, any objections? Approved. On 7:24, make that change as noted. Gail, and any other comments on 7:24's meeting?
I move they be approved.
Any seconding?
Second.
All those in favor, hand raise, opposed, none. Next, we talked a little bit about, having a meeting once in August. My inclination, since it is close to Labor Day, that we cancel our next meeting. Anybody object to that or would like to meet?
Didn't we say we're gonna wait until we get some,
Okay, why don't we do that, that's right.
Okay.
So we'll
If
see
it's
what we
all-
get back from Betsy and we have to meet, we'll meet. If anybody can't make that date,
What's the
Or-
date?
The 28th.
So I'm not going to object, but I also then don't wanna hear, oh my gosh, we're too busy, we can't, we gotta rush. So, I think we hear both sides, so I don't wanna,
I will hold a meeting if the board so desires.
I won't be here.
That's two won't be here,
I'll be here.
so I'll have a full board if we decide anything substantial, but okay, we'll play that by ear. Otherwise, 7:11 and 9:11 and 9:25. Any other comments? Otherwise, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Second.
Any objections? Thank you all. See you in September.
What's wrong?
Thank you.